Welcome back. So I still feel a little bit sick as I'm still having a bit of a nasty cough, which is why on Friday I am actually going to go do a COVID test to just make sure that I did not catch COVID while I was down in vacation in Florida. Nasty cough is definitely one of the COVID symptoms, and again, I'm just hoping that when I do that COVID test on Friday and gets the result a couple of days later, it's going to be a negative, and that I don't have to be forced to be quarantined in my home if I'm going to be tested positive for COVID-19. Because what sucks about that is that it's not just because I am forced to stay home and I can't really ground hop or anything, but I am most likely going to not be able to attend the final regular season game for the Quakes on decision day, and I'll talk about later on when I do the review or the preview of decision day of why that is very important for me to attend that game, even though most likely the Quakes are going to be out of playoff picture. But speaking of decision day, we're not that far away from them. In fact, decision day is actually going to be in 10 days time, and for this next couple of weeks we're still going to get some midweek games in terms of next week heading into decision day, but this is really the last time we're going to have pretty much a ton of midweek games that is going to happen, as we're going to have 11 games that's going to be happening tonight, including at one point there's going to be 9 games that's going to be on the same time. And whenever that happens, I'm just going to do my best. And I think there's also going to be like 7 games that's going to be kicking off around 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Well, actually, I think it's 6 games that is kicking off at that time. Yeah, there's just no way in the world I am able to keep track of all that game at time, which is also why most likely I will not be doing the review until tomorrow, because I'm definitely going to have to watch some of these condensed highlights, and there are going to be some matches that I won't be able to see because I got to pick and choose which 4 games I want to keep an eye at the same time, and kind of just move on from that. But let us actually begin with the busy Wednesday action. We've talked about the first match between New England versus Colorado. So this is the only matchup for this midweek action that is an interconference matchup, and it's between two very good teams that is playing in an interconference matchup. That is, the Revs currently have the best record in the league at 21-7-4, and they have another shot of potentially making history in this game, as they can break LAFC 2019 regular season record of points with a win in this game against the Rapids. Whereas for the Rapids, they're only 3 points behind the top seed in the West with a 15-10-6 record, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize that was the case. Like, a lot of people thought maybe the Rapids are just going to be stuck in third place, and that's where they're going to cement themselves heading into the playoff. No, they're actually not that far from getting the top seed, and that's all because of the fact that Seattle has started to kind of stutter a little bit, and it gives a chance for the Rapids to kind of get themselves in the noses of potentially getting that top seed. Though that being said, the team ahead of them, which is Sporting KC, and that they're actually tied on points with Sporting KC right now. They do still have one additional game in hand over the Rapids coming into this one. Though the Rapids does have a game in hand over the Sounders, so technically they could tie for the top seed for the Sounders if they can, of course, get a win in this. But it's not going to be easy because most teams that go to New England this season have not been able to get wins. And for the Revs, I'm not sure this is going to be the game that they're going to be celebrating the Supporters Shield winning team, because last week they officially clinched the Supporters Shield. But I guess maybe if they do get a win, then they'll definitely celebrate it, because not only you get a win in front of your home fans, but also breaking the record and holding the Supporters Shield is definitely a great moment. But we shall see. Coming into this game between two very good team, and usually when you have two very good team that is facing against each other in the interconference matchup, it could be maybe a preview of the MLS Cup. And well, no doubt New England is the favorites of winning MLS Cup this year. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not if the Rapids, who I still think that they are probably a tier lower than all those teams that is contending for MLS Cup in the Western Conference, because this season they haven't really have done very successful against really good team. But if they can win this game against New England, then they really have put themselves in the conversation that, yeah, they are indeed an MLS Cup contender heading into the Western Conference. But that being said, moving on into the next match, and that of course, is the first of 6 games that's going to be kicking off at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific between Atlanta United versus Inter Miami. Well, technically, all of them kicking off at the same time, but this is the first game I'm going to talk about, and this is a matchup between Atlanta, who is in a freeway tie for 6th place at 43 points. So I talked about the Eastern Conference for a long time being very log-jammed. It is still that at that part. In fact, I think between 5th all the way down to 9th place, it's only separated by 2 points. And right now, 6th, 7th, and 8th place is tied at 43 points. While for Miami, they are 5 points back off the playoff line. And despite the fact that they had an incredible week last week, winning against FC Cincinnati and TFC and pretty much outscored both of those teams by a combined score of 8-1. Those are 2 of the worst teams in the league. And this is really going to be the big test for Inter Miami. And in some ways, it's kind of a must-win for Inter Miami because, with the way that there's only like 2 games left after this one, Miami could be up for elimination if they do not win this game against Atlanta and other resort kind of go against them. So in some way, it's an absolute must-win for Miami, but for Atlanta, it's also kind of a must-win for them. Although Atlanta, as I will talk about a little bit later, of another team, they have the luxury, the fact that they do have a game in hand over the team around them. So even if they lose that game, they'll still be left on point. They will still have that game in hand against those other team that may be past them, but that they definitely want to get a win to try and solidify themselves in the playoffs, because despite how Atlanta has done much better in the second half of the season, they still haven't solidified themselves of potentially clinching the playoffs, and there's still no guarantee that this team can, of course, make it to the playoffs this season. But that being said, moving on into the next game, and that, of course, is FC Cincinnati taking on Nashville SC, which will also start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and the actual kickoff time is 7:38 p.m. local time. In fact, I'll probably don't even talk about the kickoff or actual start time anymore, because the next 3 games is pretty much the same thing. But coming into this game for Cincinnati, they will make some history in this game, although not in a good way, as they will be clinching their 3rd straight wooden spoon if they do suffer a loss in this game, or TFC, or actually they'll suffer a loss and TFC gets a draw and a win. But for Nashville SC, they're winless in the last 6 games, and despite the fact that they are tied for 2nd position for the Union for that 2nd seed in the East, they don't have the tiebreaker, because the Union has the tiebreaker over them in wins. And this also goes back to what I said, how those draws really have killed this team in terms of their chances in the tiebreaker, and that the fact that they are winless in the last 6 games and they are heading into the playoffs not in the best form, they desperately need a win. Now, the good news is they get to play against FC Cincinnati, which, this season, if you need a win desperately, FC Cincinnati is basically your solution. And I hate to always say that for Cincinnati fans, but when you're a team that only won 4 games this season, and they're really about to probably match the record that the Quakes had, where you remember that 2018 Quakes team only win 4 games. Cincinnati is about to do so, and this could historically be even worse than the first 2 seasons that they were in the league. And this is just been a hugely disappointing season. I kind of already mentioned that when I talked about the moving forward series, and we'll see as these last couple of games where they just kind of play out the string what kind of changes is going to be happening in the off season. But for Nashville, they still have something to play for, and they want that number 2 seed, and they also want to head into the playoffs with some momentum. This is a game for them to get the bounce back and get a win in this one, even though they're playing on the road. But now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is Columbus versus Orlando City. So Columbus 10-8-13, while Orlando City is 12-11-8. Columbus are 5 points back off the playoff line. In fact, they're actually tied with Miami in terms of points in 10th place right now, but Miami does have the tiebreaker on wins on them. While for Orlando, they're only 4 points above the red line, and while they are definitely in a good position of potentially clinching in these next game or 2, they're still not exactly like, almost an automatic guarantee that they are going to make it to the playoffs. But they're close. If they can get a win against Columbus in this game, and I'll say the same thing about the Columbus Crew as I said with Inter Miami, they need to win this game. I mean, if they do not win this game, and depending on if other resort goes against them, they're going to be eliminated for this season and become the the first team to be eliminated as a defending champion since TFC back in 2018. And for the Crew, it's just been a frustrating season. I mean, this season it's been a year that they just have not replicated the success that they had in that MLS Cup winning season, and the attack so far this season hasn't been at its best. But what's also alarming is that the defense has been really terrible this season, and what makes this team so good last season, not only with the attack but also the defensive structure that they had last season, it has just not been shown this year. But they still have a chance to kind of correct that and make it to the playoffs, but it all starts with a must-win game in this one against Orlando. And if they want any shot of making the playoffs and their fringe playoff hopes to keep alive, they need to win this game against Orlando City. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Atlantic Cup between DC United and the New York Redbulls. And this is probably the biggest Atlantic Cup that we have seen in recent memory, because this is definitely a definition of a six-pointer. And don't be surprised, it won't be the first time I will be using that, because we're getting to that part of the season when you have two teams that is on the bubble facing off against each other. It's the definition of a playoff six-pointer, because for DC, they're currently 2 points below the red line with a 12-5-14 record, while the Redbulls are part of that freeway tie for sixth place at 43 points. But they are considered one, if not the hottest team right now in the league, having gone unbeaten in the last 8 games, and doing that 8-game stretch, I think they have won 6 games doing that. So it's not just that the fact that they have not lost in a very long time, but doing that stretch, they have won games doing that run to really propel themselves for a team that looked like they were done a couple of weeks ago to now being a team that is in prime position of making the playoffs. But that being said, this is the Atlantic Cup, and they have to play on the road against this DC team, where you think, if a team that needs to win this Atlantic Cup the most, it has to be DC United, because the Redbulls, like what I said about Atlanta, they're one of those two teams that have the benefit of the doubt that they get a game in hand over the team around them. DC is not the same case. I mean, they need to get a win if they can maybe get themselves above the red line, and even then, they also will need to have some help from other teams if they aren't able to do so. And not to mention the fact that they need to bounce back after that tough loss that they suffer against NYCFC. Well, tough loss is an understatement, because that was an absolute demolition that they suffered on the weekend's action when they lost 6-0, and that the only way to try to get yourself back into playoff conversation and trying to kind of forget about that ugly result is to get a win in this game against your most hated rival, that is the New York Redbulls. But we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case. And speaking of NYCFC, moving on into the next match is NYCFC versus the Chicago Fire. And also, I mentioned this yesterday, but I think I probably should have talked about this earlier, where I'm actually doing this very quickly, and I'm kind of almost rushing this because, the first game is actually going to be starting in about 2.5 hour time at the time of this recording, and I want to make sure I get this done and upload it before the first game actually kicked off. But in the last game on this board, before I switch the boards, is NYCFC taking on the Chicago Fire. NYCFC, of course, have a 12-8-11 record, while the Fire has a 9-7-6 record. This game, of course, will also start 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. NYCFC, of course, is 1 point above the red line right now. In fact, if you look at where they are in the playoff implication, if let's say both the Redbulls and Atlanta does win their game in hand, they can leapfrog NYCFC, and all of a sudden NYCFC find themselves as the last team out, and all those team up below them are trying to get that spot. And this game they are going to be playing against a Fire team that have already eliminated from playoff contention with a 9-7-16 record, while NYCFC have a 12-8-11 record. But recently, the Fire, they have been doing very well in terms of playing spoiler, and are a team that definitely is not playing out the string. Like, you can see this team is definitely still working hard and trying to fight for jobs for next season. So this is not going to be an easy game for NYCFC, and as good as the performance that they had against DC United, they need to continue that, because it's great that you beat your opponent 6-0, but at the end of the day, it's still only 3 points. You need to, of course, keep that momentum going, and we shall see whether or not if they are going to do so against a Fire team that is definitely going to trying to give them all give them all they can handle to get a big 3 points in this one against NYCFC. But that being said, I am now going to change sports and look at the last 5 games of the Wednesday action of match week number 33 midweek action. Alrighty, so moving on into the last 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific start out of those 6 that happened in this Wednesday action is Toronto versus the Philadelphia Union. So TFC already eliminated from playoff contention with a 6-8-17 record, while the Union has a 13-10-8 record and are currently tied second in the Eastern Conference with Nashville SC. But keep in mind they do have the tiebreaker over Nashville on wins, and while this game is going to be a little bit tougher compared to what Nashville is going to be facing against Cincinnati, where that seems like it's a sure win for Nashville SC. This is still a relatively easy game for the Union, though. TFC, they are trying to once again play the spoiler road again. They played the spoiler road very well in the last game in the Canadian Classic against Montreal and kind of spoiled their playoff hope. They have a chance in this one again, though it's not because of playoff or elimination or playoff implication, because the Union have already clinched the playoffs, but maybe spoil the Union chance to potentially get that second seed and maybe help out Nashville in terms of getting the second seed. Though I think if you're a TFC fan, I'm not quite sure if that's maybe something they really want to do, but we'll see whether or not if they can do so, or will the Union get a win in this game and keep pace of potentially Nashville getting all 3 points against FC Cincinnati. But now moving on into the next match here on this board, and that, of course, is going to be FC Dallas versus RSL. So this game, of course, will be starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Dallas, of course, they're already eliminated from playoff contention with a 6-11, and I kind of did not do a good job in terms of writing their loss total. I think it's like 16 losses that they suffer. I think, or actually no. Let me just double check very quickly right now in terms of the Dallas record, because again I didn't really do a good job writing that down. In fact, I'll probably look here on my phone right now. Let me take a look. They have a 6-11-14 record, while RSL has a 12-6-12 record. And as I mentioned, Dallas, of course, already eliminated from playoff contention, but they have a chance to play spoiler because they are playing against an RSL team that is currently 2 points below the red line, but they do have a game in hand over pretty much everybody above them, and including 2 games in hand over the team that currently occupies the last spot in the playoffs in the Western Conference, that is LAFC. But that being said, for RSL this season, they have really struggled on the road, and if they want to make it to the playoffs, they still have 2 more home games left after this one, and 2 out of their last 3 games is going to be at home. But when you look at the remaining schedule that they have, I believe they play Sporting KC on the road on the final day. Yeah, that could be a really tough game, though, that depending on whether or not if SKC is still fighting for that top spot in the West. But before we get to that, they definitely need to take care of business against FC Dallas. And one thing we know about Dallas is that, even though they're eliminated, they can be a tough team to play, especially playing against them on the road. And again, judging by the fact that RSL have not done very well on the road this season, yeah, this could be interesting to see whether or not if RSL can buck that trend so that they can get a massive 3 points to maybe even keep in pace, or in the best case scenario, find themselves above the red line once again and have those games in hand over teams above them. But speaking of Sporting KC, moving on into the next match is going to be them against the LA Galaxy, and this game is actually going to be on national television. I thought none of the game is going to be on national television, but when I start writing this board, I actually found out that this game is a rare national television game that's going to be on FS1, and it will start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:55 p.m. local time. Sporting KC, of course, they are trying to fight for the top spot in the Western Conference, and they technically have a really good chance to do so, because they have 2 games in hand over the Sounders and are 3 points back. Whereas for the Galaxy, they only are 2 points above the red line right now, but they're also 1 point from the 4 spot, which, the 4 spot is very important because that's the last spot to host at least one playoff game in the playoffs. But that being said, I mentioned before with the Galaxy, now they're going to be starting to go through a stretch where they're going to play against some tough team, because after this game, it's not going to get easy for them, as they will have to face their top team in the Western Conference, that is the Seattle Sounders, before facing Minnesota on the final day of the season. And yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can survive this gauntlet that they have in the latter part of the season, because Sporting KC is just not going to let down. Like, Sporting KC right now, they definitely have a lot of confidence after that game against the Sounders. But that being said, it's one thing to have confidence, and it's another to have a letdown. And after that big win against the Sounders, we'll see whether or not if Sporting KC maybe have a little bit of a letdown against a lesser opponent. But I think Peter Vermees is making sure his team is not going to have that, because he's going to remind his team that there is still a chance that they can get top spot. And in fact, they're really in the driving seat to potentially get that top spot, with them 3 points behind and have 2 games in hand over the Seattle Sounders. But now moving on into the next match, and that, of course, is the Portland Timbers taking on the San Jose Earthquakes. So remember how a couple of weeks ago when the Timbers were on an incredible run, and that it seems like they solidified their 4th position and solidified their chances of clinching the playoffs? Yeah, 3 losses in a row. All of a sudden, not only they find themselves still hanging on for dear life for that final playoff spot where you can play a home game in the playoffs, but now all of a sudden they find themselves back in this particular bubble where they're only 2 points above the red line. Like, that is, they're all of a sudden find themselves in a way where if they continue this losing run, they could find themselves missing the playoffs. And that was something that I didn't think it was going to happen a couple of weeks ago, when they were in an incredible run and were one of the hottest team in the league. Now, the good news is they do have a chance to end their losing streak, and in some way, playing against the Quakes is what the doctors order for the Timbers, because despite the fact that the Quakes, they still have a fringe play of hoping they're not officially eliminated, they will be if they lose to the Portland Timbers. And not to mention the fact that the Quakes have never won against the Timbers on the road, and I always say that it's pretty much an automatic L every time when the Quakes play against the Timbers on the road. I have a feeling the Quakes will be eliminated in this game, and that for the Timbers, they need to win this one, because it's not just keeping that 4th spot, but also trying to stay above the red line, where again, a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't seem like that was going to be an issue. And we'll see whether or not if that's going to be happening, as this game will, of course, start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. And also, I got the record wrong for the Timbers. They're not 14-4-3. They're actually 14-4-13 right now as their record, while the Quakes have a 9-10-12 record. But now moving on into the final game on this board, is no doubt probably the most important game of this Wednesday game action. If you want to talk about a game that is kind of like the game of the week in terms of all these 11 games that's happening on Wednesday, it's this one between the Vancouver Whitecaps versus Minnesota. Because while the Atlantic Cup is kind of a playoff 6-pointer, this is the ultimate playoff 6-pointer. I mean, Vancouver, they're currently tied with LAFC for the last spot in the playoffs in the West, but the Whitecaps does have a game in hand over LAFC, whereas for the Loons, they are only 1 point above the red line with an 11-11-9 record, while Vancouver has a 12-9-10 record, and this game will start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time, and I just have a feeling that this could be a game that could decide who is going to make the playoffs, or this could be a game where the winner of this game, I have a feeling, is going to make the playoffs, and the loser of this game might most likely miss the playoffs. And for me, I don't know if the Loons can pull off a victory. It's if there is a time where they need to get a road win, this of course will do so. But judging by the fact that the Whitecaps, they have shown their resilient, and is a team that has been really tough to beat against in recent time, it's not going to be easy whatsoever. And that another thing that I'm also hoping is Adrian, he better not just kind of park the bus and hope to just get a draw out of this game, which now that I'm saying it, probably he's going to do that, and it's going to frustrate the hell out of me, because yes, I know they wanted getting a point on the road against the Whitecaps is not the worst thing possible. In fact, it's kind of a good thing, knowing the fact that they'll still stay a point above the Whitecaps. But you know, knowing the fact that they have to play Sporting KC next and finish the season against the Galaxy on the road, you just feel like they need to of course win this game so that they can get some buffer zone. But so yeah, we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. But ultimately, again, this is a game where I think the winner of this game is most likely going to have a chance to make the playoffs, and the loser of this game most likely is going to miss the playoffs this season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview of all 11 games. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all of these 11 games? And, you know, at the end of this Wednesday night action, we will once again have a very good look of how the playoff picture is going to be, because for most of these teams, there's only like 3 games. Well, for 2 games left, and for some teams there's still 3 games left in the season, and we are getting to that point where as we get closer to decision day, it's going to really be very interesting to see where each team is going to be. And also, this is kind of the most exciting part of the season, because you know, now is the time where I'm looking at all these teams, and you know, with all those playoff races that is around the bubble, and also the races for the top seed, at least in the Western Conference, and also those seedings that is going on. It can be very fascinating to see. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these 11 games, and make sure let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 11 of these games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.